Ann-Margret, vivacious, versatile, and very sexy. This actress still has millions of fans saying, "Viva Ann-Margret." Every year since 1960, the Vasa Order of America has selected a prominent American citizen of Swedish birth or descent to become Swedish American of the Year. This year, the award went to Ann-Margret, an honor she shares with past winners like Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, William Rehnquist. Ann-Margret has come a long way since 1963, the year Bye Bye Birdie put her on the map and created Hollywood's newest star.
7.
All right, Ann.
10.
Won't you come home, dear baby? No, won't you come on home? I'm up the whole night long.
She was the provocative teenage sensation who created a national stir with her sultry voice and swiveling hips.
The minute she got on stage and sang, everybody fell in love with her.
Maybe I'm not a girl to have and to hold. Maybe I'm not a girl who would stay.
She is a dynamic live performer, more than any female that I can think of, and was the female Elvis.
From her memorable film and television roles to her legendary Las Vegas extravaganzas, she possessed a talent and tenacity that few could match.
She is a fighter from the get-go. If you want to get something done and everyone says it can't be done, call Ann-Margret.
Ann-Margret is the ultimate survivor. People don't realize she's been a star for 40 years.
In a life lived out in the spotlight, Ann-Margret overcame personal demons and professional disappointments with the same courage and determination that made her a star.
Underneath that sort of sex pot exterior is really a rather kind and real person.
In 1941, Europe was in the throes of World War II. Norway, Poland, and Czechoslovakia had all fallen to Nazi aggression, and Sweden's border pulsed with the threat of occupation. It was in Stockholm, Sweden, that Ann-Margret Olsen was born on April 28, 1941. Her mother, Anna, was a shy and sheltered 21-year-old, and her father, Gustav, a 39-year-old free spirit, was an electrician by trade. The happy, loving couple were thrilled by the arrival of their only child, but as the war raged on around them, the tight-knit family was forced to separate. Jobs became scarce for Gustav, and in 1942, he left Sweden to find work in America. Anna and her toddler left Stockholm to live with family in the small Swedish town of Bolsjabin, a mere 10 miles from the border of Nazi-occupied Norway. State military were stationed in the hillside town, patrolling the streets and calming the nerves of the local residents. Many of the soldiers spent their free time at the family's village cafe, where they'd be entertained by little Ann-Margret, now 2, who would sing Swedish folk songs her mother had taught her.
They would take requests if, they could, and if they didn't know the song, they would try and learn it. The soldiers, of course, loved it, and it made for happier times.
It would take the end of the war to reunite the Olsen family. In 1946, after a 4-year separation, Anna and Ann-Margret boarded the steamship Gripsholm, bound for New York City and a new life in the United States. It was a joyous reunion for the 5-year-old and her father. As a special treat, he took Ann-Margret to the spectacular Radio City Music Hall to see her first movie, followed by a dazzling stage show featuring the Rockettes.
I think that blew Ann-Margret away. It never stopped after that with Ann-Margret. I mean, the music hit her, and it stayed with her.
Next stop was Chicago, where Ann-Margret's father had made a home in the suburb of Fox Lake. There, they were welcomed by a loving and supportive group of relatives who had left Sweden before the war. Although she learned English quickly, the little girl was growing timid and withdrawn in her new homeland. To help her gain confidence, her parents enrolled her in dance classes. The budding dancer had talent and grew more poised and self-assured with each class. With her newfound confidence came a desire to be the best and to make her parents proud.
Mrs. Olsen would make all of her costumes. It was a very hard thing because they didn't have money, and her mom was cleaning houses at this time in Fox Lake to get money to pay for these lessons and to nurture what was there, because it was there.
But when she was 11 years old, Gustav was injured in a serious accident that turned the Olsens' world upside down. Her father was unable to work, and the family was forced out of their home. Desperate, her mother took a job as a secretary in a funeral home in exchange for lodging. Ann-Margret had to sleep near the caskets, awaiting the next day's burial. But hard times only made the family closer. Although almost a year went by before Gustav had completely recuperated, the immigrant family was grateful that together they had successfully weathered another storm. In 1955, Ann-Margret entered her freshman year at New Trier High School in Winnetka, Illinois. Famous for its drama program, the school boasted such alumni as Rock Hudson and Charlton Heston. By now, the aspiring dancer had also shown promise as a singer and was a standout in school productions and local talent contests. At 16 years old, she even appeared on the renowned Ted Mack's Original Amateur Hour, a nationally syndicated talent show, singing Them There Eyes.
My heart is something, you should start with something with them there eyes. You better watch them if you're wise. They sparkle and they bubble. They're gonna get you in a whole lot of trouble. You're overworking them, they said you're lurking in there.
While other classmates contemplated their future professions, the self-assured teenager knew that being an entertainer was exactly what she wanted.
She was 50% courage and 50% determination. She went down to Chicago. She said to her mother, "Let me go down and I'll find myself an agent." And by gosh, she did.
At 16, Ann-Margret signed with an agent and got work as a singer at local clubs and events. The ambitious performer was now developing into a beautiful young woman. And it was during her senior year, at a simple high school musical review, that a provocative entertainer began to emerge. Slithering out from behind the curtain in a tight chartreuse dress, she sang a scalding rendition of Heat Wave.
We're having a heat wave, a tropical heat wave. The way that she moves that thermometer proves that she certainly can.
She was inspired by Rita Hayworth and that whole kind of sultry delivery. And she knocked the socks off of the audience and offended some parents because it was so sensual. I mean, she could turn it on, even at that early age.
By the age of 17, the mature and intelligent teenager began to identify her burgeoning stage persona as the other Ann-Margret.
Annie was two very different people. In reality, she's very shy, very respectful, very reserved. But underneath, there was all that fire and all that punch. When she sang, she got to be somebody totally different.
In 1959, Ann-Margret enrolled in the prestigious drama department at Northwestern University, where she joined a sorority and became the lead singer of a campus combo named the Subtle Tones. After exploding on the local scene, the band got an offer to play a summer engagement in Las Vegas. And in June of 1960, with her concerned parents' blessings, Ann-Margret and the Subtle Tones headed west. But as soon as they arrived, the excited quartet discovered their performance had been canceled. Undaunted, they took the 5-hour drive to Hollywood, California, sure that they would find work there. Within weeks, the fearless co-eds were appearing in trendy local nightclubs. But not even Ann-Margret could dream up the frenzy that began when she caught the eye of a talent agent and got an audition with the popular entertainer George Burns.
She comes in and she sings Mac the Knife, Bill Bailey, and George Burns is smitten as could be by her. He just loves her, thinks she's great, and decides to actually put her in his show in Las Vegas.
The 1960 George Burns Christmas Revue was enormously popular with Hollywood's elite. The fresh-faced and energetic singer was showcased to many of the industry's heavy hitters, and her reviews were tremendous. The show led to an RCA record contract, an unprecedented 14-page feature in Life magazine, and a screen test for 20th Century Fox.
Was that really the first drink you ever had?
Whiskey?
Uh-huh.
Don't be silly. I've had lots of drinks.
All right. How many is a lot?
One, at least.
For her test, the Hollywood hopeful was asked to perform 2 songs. First, a Rodgers and Hammerstein classic, and then a number from the Teenagers Nightclub Act.
I'm as restless as a willow in a windstorm. I'm as jumpy as a puppet on a string. I'd say that I had spring fever, but I know it isn't spring.
Then it comes time to do another up-tempo song. Well, she does this song, and she just shakes the place. Unbelievable. It throws the little girl image out the window, and they see the other side of Ann-Margret.
Won't you come home, dear baby? No, won't you come on home? I'm up the whole night long. I do the cooking, honey. I live and pay the rent.
The movie executives were bowled over by the little girl with a big talent. Ann-Margret signed a 7-year contract with 20th Century Fox and immediately moved her parents from Wilmette, Illinois, to live with her in Los Angeles. At only 19 years of age, Ann-Margret had made a grand entrance into show business, but nothing could prepare her or America for the whirlwind that would follow.
You are watching Ann-Margret on Biography.
They usually say, where do you find young talent? Well, you don't find them, they find you. I was sitting in my office, this little girl came in and she sang 2 songs and I took her to Las Vegas with me. And here she is on the Jack Benny Show. And I think she's got a brilliant career. Help me bring her on. Ann-Margret.
In 1961, 20-year-old Ann-Margret was receiving the old-fashioned star treatment and made an appearance with her mentor George Burns on the popular Jack Benny Show. For her film debut, the actress was loaned out for a small role in director Frank Capra's Pocketful of Miracles, starring Bette Davis. But it was in 1962 when she performed the Oscar-nominated song Bachelor in Paradise at the Academy Awards that Ann-Margret was introduced to 40 million television viewers.
This little girl came on and I went, this girl is going to be a major star. We saw history when that young lady came out and sang Bachelor in Paradise.
20th Century Fox was considering the appealing singer for the part of the wholesome lead character in their remake of State Fair. But when production began, Ann-Margret was cast in the role of the fiery siren Emily. Director Jose Ferrer had the attractive 20-year-old's long brown hair dyed bright orange or Titian, and her image was forever altered.
Cut. Our State Fair is a great state fair. Don't miss it, don't even be late.
The film starred Alice Faye, Pat Boone, and Tom Ewell, and featured the wonderful music of Rodgers and Hammerstein. But the 1962 version had little in common with the 1945 film, and at times took on a very contemporary and suggestive approach.
Darling, are you sure that this is the right place for you to be?
I don't understand. What do you mean?
That I've been here before.
In this room?
No. The number's different, but I've been here.
Does that mean you're a bad girl?
No, but I wouldn't want to run a gal pull on it.
I knew that 20th wanted her to be the next Marilyn Monroe. They wanted her to be the sex queen. We knew they were expecting big things. She lived up to all their expectations.
In one of the main production numbers, Isn't It Kind of Fun?, Ann-Margret's character is transformed into a wild seductress in a skin-tight costume and stiletto heels. The role was tailor-made for the other Ann-Margret.
The girl of your dreams. But isn't it kind of fun to look in each other's eyes, swapping romantic dreams?
The scene lasted less than 3 minutes, but Ann-Margret's mesmerizing performance firmly established her as an irresistible sex kitten.
Yeah.
She was a complete professional, and I knew she was talented, but I inwardly thought this girl may be a little too nice for this business. I mean, really genuinely good and nice.
Although the film was a disappointment at the box office, critics and audiences loved Ann-Margret. Her next film, Bye Bye Birdie, starring Dick Van Dyke, Janet Leigh, and Bobby Rydell, spoofed America's obsession with Elvis Presley and made Ann-Margret a household name.
Conrad Birdie. Mommy! Mommy! Baby! Mommy! Conrad Birdie's coming here to kiss me!
Bye Bye Birdie is all about that certain something that excites young people when they reach that certain age, especially girls like Ann-Margret.
Time for me to fly. Time for me to fly. Time to say goodbye. Bye now.
The movie premiered on April 5th, 1963 at Radio City Music Hall in New York. It was a huge success. In its first week, it grossed more money than any film in Radio City's 30-year history, and Ann-Margret mania began to sweep the country. The overnight sensation was immediately booked for 11 more films and immortalized as the cartoon character Ann-Margret in Hanna-Barbera's The Flintstones. The demand for the new star had even reached the nation's capital. She was invited to sing at President John F. Kennedy's private birthday party in 1963, just a year after Marilyn Monroe gave her memorable rendition of Happy Birthday. But once she was introduced to Elvis Presley, the two sex symbols became one of the most unforgettable couples in screen history.
Bright light said it gonna set my soul, gonna set my soul on fire. Got a whole lot of money that's ready to burn, so get those stakes up higher. Viva Las Vegas! Viva Las Vegas!
Viva Elvis! Viva Ann-Margret! Viva the excitement when these two let themselves go on a wild and woolly whirl through Funtown, USA. Yes, the sky's the limit for love, laughter, and those wonderful new sounds.
She loves me.
Would you like to make a bet?
I said the lady loves me.
When this boy falls, he really falls hard. But who wouldn't? When the girl is seductive Ann-Margret.
Ann-Margret and Elvis felt an immediate chemistry. They had both become icons of the teen film revolution and had experienced meteoric rises in show business. They shared similar values, a love for family, a desire for privacy, and a passion for motorcycles. The pairing was so hot that when the publicity photos from the film's final wedding scene were released early, a wave of speculation about a real-life wedding swept through the fan magazines. But although there were no real marriage plans, Ann-Margret and Elvis shared a very special and very private relationship.
It's obvious from seeing the film that, there was a lot more magnetism than just on the screen. They had their romance, and they stopped.
Viva Las Vegas was an enormous success. But Ann-Margret now found herself committed to a series of less appealing projects, films she had been committed to before reading the scripts, including The Pleasure Seekers and Kitten with a Whip.
They call her Jody, but her real name is Trouble.
Well, am I terrific?
She's irresistible.
I'll get my claws into you before anyone gets here.
She's defiant.
Oh, you're so eager.
She's Ann-Margret as Jody Dvorak, a special kind of doll.
You're insane.
She uses her sex like an animal uses teeth.
While filming the thriller Once a Thief in San Francisco, Ann-Margret began dating the dashing 32-year-old Roger Smith, star of television's 77 Sunset Strip. Although Roger was currently separated from his wife and 3 young children, he and Ann-Margret fell madly in love. Professionally, Ann-Margret's career had taken a beating from a string of mediocre films she had made under contractual obligations. The public and the press were confused and disappointed by the dramatic change in her image. But the 24-year-old was determined to regain her former status and broaden her screen image. When Fox announced the casting of Bing Crosby, Red Buttons, and Stephanie Powers in the star-studded remake of the 1939 classic western Stagecoach, the struggling actress was thrilled to be chosen for the role of Dallas, the saloon girl.
Here we are, waiting to fall off a mountain if the Indians don't get us first. And both of us owing it to the same man.
You don't know my husband. You couldn't.
Honey, you may sleep with him, but you sure don't know him.
She was very nervous. The studio had put pressure on her, the critics had put pressure on her, and she had a lot riding on a successful portrayal.
But when Stagecoach was not the hit that Ann-Margret or Fox had hoped for, the young actress knew she was heading toward a career crisis. Only 2 years earlier, Ann-Margret had been Hollywood's hottest commodity. But now, at only 25, she would have to pull out all the stops to prove to the world that she was more than a minx, she was a movie star.
You are watching Ann-Margret on Biography.
Some girls swing because they want to. Some girls swing because they have to. And then there are girls who swing because...
Hey, swinger.
It's the natural thing to do.
Swing your nose the way it's happening.
In an attempt to reignite her professional popularity, Ann-Margret starred in the musical comedy The Swinger. But the film was yet another sexual romp that only served to exploit the actress, and she feared that her career was over. But if professionally she was in dire straits, personally she was happier than ever. After a 3-year courtship, 34-year-old Roger Smith asked the 25-year-old for her hand in marriage. On May 8, 1967, the couple eloped to Las Vegas for a private ceremony. But the media descended upon the little chapel, and the tearful bride found herself surrounded by a circus of camera-ready paparazzi. The newlyweds skipped their honeymoon and returned to their home in Beverly Hills, where Roger soon learned that despite the millions she had earned, his new wife was several $100,000 in debt due to poor management. Attempting to get her finances in order, Ann-Margret went to work in Las Vegas, headlining her first glittering nightclub act. And on June 7, 1967, she opened the show at the Riviera Hotel to a sold-out house with standing room only. But even after the smashing 5-week engagement, there were no quality offers from Hollywood. To keep the money coming in, she made a series of films in Italy where she was extremely popular. But in Hollywood, Ann-Margret still needed to prove herself. Here in this recently discovered test, Ann-Margret tries out for the part of Irene Malloy in the big-budget 20th Century Fox musical Hello, Dolly.
Minnie, make up another hat for Miss Mortimer. I'm wearing this one myself.
You can't.
Why not?
Because it's too provocative, that's why not.
Well, who knows that provocative isn't just what I might want to be today.
Oh, I won't listen to another word.
I'll be wearing ribbons down my back this summer.
The role of Irene eventually went to newcomer Marianne McAndrew, and Ann-Margret's professional frustration peaked. She feared that she would be relegated to minor roles in B films forever.
She literally didn't have any more offers. After this went on, and we were all so close, I said, Roger, we just can't let this happen. We're just going to lose her career.
Roger and his longtime partner, Alan Carr, offered to take over management of the struggling performer's career. In an unprecedented move, they convinced CBS to produce a one-hour variety special called The Ann-Margret Show.
It was difficult because the networks didn't know if she still had the drawing power, because she hadn't sung and danced in a movie in a while, and that's what America fell in love with. But we finally made the deal, and the show was sensational.
The show's high ratings proved that America was still interested in the former sensation and gave Ann-Margret a much-needed boost in her professional popularity. In 1968, Bob Hope brought the beautiful 27-year-old on her second tour of Vietnam, where they entertained some of the 500,000 American men who were serving in the Vietnam War.
And you're a show business phenomenon. You became a star overnight.
Well, I was very, very lucky. I did a song on the Academy Awards, and people were nice enough to notice me.
Notice you. You shorted every power line between Santa Monica and Kansas City.
You're exaggerating.
It had been over 25 years since little Ann-Margret entertained World War II soldiers at her grandmother's cafe in Sweden, and it was with great pride that she entertained thousands of war-weary men. By the end of the decade, the bye-bye birdie America that had fit Ann-Margret so perfectly had changed dramatically. And Hollywood was reflecting the sobering sentiment with films that often had darker, more cynical themes. Despite the popularity of 2 more television specials, as well as solid performances in films like RPM and CC and Company, the 28-year-old was in danger of being labeled a creature of her time.
For Annie to get a dramatic part was very tough. She excelled at what she was doing, and the public loved it, and that was swell, and they weren't about to start casting her in something else.
In 1970, acclaimed director Mike Nichols was casting his provocative film Carnal Knowledge. After auditioning 18 actresses, he remembered Ann-Margret's performance in Kitten with a Whip, and he requested her for the role of Bobby Templeton, a voluptuous siren betrayed by her sexuality and her men. Co-starring Jack Nicholson, Art Garfunkel, and Candice Bergen, the uncompromising dramatic role was precisely the part Ann-Margret needed to turn her acting career around.
I know I sleep all day. I know I'm doing a terrible job, but you're not helping me any. I'm a man-eater, a ball-buster, and castrator. I want to get married.
Why now?
I need a life.
Get a job!
I don't want a job. I want you.
I'm taken by me! Oh, Bobby. You don't need me. Why do you let yourself in for this kind of abuse? Walk out. Leave me. Please leave me. For God's sake, I'd almost marry if you'd leave me.
Call it abuse. You don't know what I'm used to. With all you're carrying on. To me, you're a gift.
She was just magnificent in it. Absolutely wonderful. An awful lot of people, having seen what work she had done prior to that, still have said, that wasn't Ann-Margret. Who was that?
The role was more difficult than anything Ann-Margret had played before, and for the first time in her career, she found herself consumed by the emotional and physical demands of her character.
She was taking this character to heart and to home with her. She had been taking sleeping pills at the time to get to sleep after doing these harrowing things, which becomes an addiction, and drinking, all these things together, and it was causing problems.
When she was finished, she was an emotional wreck because she takes everything to heart. She was so immersed in that character.
Carnal Knowledge opened to stellar reviews and was a smashing box office success. But still, Ann-Margret found herself unable to relax. She wanted to return to the work she loved most and headed for Las Vegas.
Roger and I and Marvin Hamlish sat down and put together a new act. And you did a very lavish act. I mean, it was like seeing like an old Technicolor Betty Grable musical. It was so much fun. It's not just seeing a star come out and just sing. She wanted to give them a whole show.
AM/PM opened at the International Hotel in the spring of 1971. Produced by Roger and Alan and with music arranged by Marvin Hamlish, AM/PM was the most elaborate stage performance of Ann-Margret's career, and it garnered glowing reviews.
Here's an actress that can do a Mike Nichols film, you know, and be very serious, and then 2 days later could be up in the Vegas stage on a motorcycle in a hot leotard. She could pretty well do it all.
But the successful return to Vegas did nothing to calm or control Ann-Margret's growing anxiety. Alcohol and sleeping pills had now become an addiction for the singer, and she knew that she needed help.
She kept her foibles and her shortcomings to herself. She was very private, and I think probably said to herself, I don't want the world to see this. I'm going to deal with this, and I'm going to overcome it.
With her husband by her side, Ann-Margret got professional treatment and dedicated herself to staying sober. The personal victory was made even sweeter when, in February of 1972, she was nominated for a Best Supporting Actress Oscar for her portrayal of Bobby Templeton in Carnal Knowledge. Although she lost the award to Cloris Leachman for her role in The Last Picture Show, 30-year-old Ann-Margret was finally being taken seriously as a dramatic actress and was earning the critical recognition she had longed for. But in the glare of success, she had no way of preparing for the string of heartaches that were just around the corner.
For the web's best bios,
Ann-Margret was putting on yet another Vegas-style spectacular, this time at the Sahara Hotel in Lake Tahoe. For her grand entrance, she stood on a platform 22 feet above the audience and waited to be lowered to the stage. But without warning, the platform tipped, wobbled, and flipped over, hurling Ann-Margret to the floor.
We're the opening act. We finish our show. We're about to go off stage through the curtain. And I heard a crack, like a bat, like a ball hitting a bat. And I looked, and I saw something white coming down. This all took a millisecond. And I saw Ann-Margret, and I thought she was dead.
For the first time since they were married, Roger was not present at the show. He was notified in the early hours of the morning at their Los Angeles home. Frantic and unable to get a commercial flight, he stole a twin-engine Cessna and piloted himself to Lake Tahoe at breakneck speed. With one look at his wife's shattered face and broken body, Roger checked her out of the hospital and flew her back to Los Angeles in the stolen plane.
He wouldn't let any of the doctors do anything to her in Lake Tahoe till he got her home with his own doctors that he could trust, that know her.
The injured singer was in a coma for 4 days. When she awoke with her jaw wired shut, Roger was by her side. It would take a team of surgeons to restore Ann-Margret's health and beauty, but it was her determination and force of will that made the difference.
When she fell off the stage, at that point, her dad was dying of cancer. And she said, I am going to beat this. I'm going to get back on the stage. I want to show my dad that I'm okay.
To the surprise and amazement of her friends, family, and doctors, on November 28th, 2.5 months after her brush with death, the valiant performer reopened her act at the Las Vegas Hilton.
As soon as the announcement was made, packed, sold out. And when she hit that stage, I have loose pimples now. The ladies and gentlemen, Miss Ann-Margret. I mean a standing ovation for what seemed like 20 minutes.
But Ann-Margret would have little time to enjoy her comeback. Only 2 months later, on February 7th, 1973, her father died after a difficult year-long battle with cancer.
She was brought up with very loving, wonderful parents, and losing her father was a horrible blow to her.
She fell into a deep depression, and despite round-the-clock attendance, Ann-Margret swallowed a bottle of painkillers. Terrified, she reached out to her therapist, who, along with her husband, made sure she received proper and very discreet medical attention. For the first time in her career, Ann-Margret took a 6-month sabbatical. The couple bought a home in Malibu, and Roger's children from his first marriage, Tracy, Jordan, and Dallas, moved in with them.
And one of the most joyful things in her life was helping raise Roger's children.
At 32 years old, the veteran performer realized that she desperately wanted to have a child of her own.
She tried to have a baby, and they tried, and they went to doctors, and they spoke to people, and they did everything because they both wanted this. It just didn't happen.
If you were to say to me, what's one thing in the world that I think Annie regrets, it's probably not having any children. I think it was a huge disappointment. A huge disappointment.
But soon, Ann-Margret received an intriguing offer from director Ken Russell.
She called me up and she said to me, Marvin, I got the script for this motion picture and I don't quite get it. And I said to her, don't have to get it yet. Trust me, do this film.
The motion picture Tommy was an assault on the senses. A no-holds-barred combination of The Who's rock opera and bizarre psychedelic images. Ann-Margret was given the part of one of the most unforgettable and provocative mothers in screen history. Tommy reteamed the actress with Jack Nicholson and featured a cast of outstanding talent, including Elton John and Tina Turner. The movie was unlike anything Ann-Margret had ever done, and it was exactly the challenge she was looking for. Audiences around the world adored the actress in Tommy, and she not only won the Golden Globe for Best Actress, she also received her second Oscar nomination. Ann-Margret, the movie star, was back, and now she focused her energies on a series of television specials, live engagements, and feature films with some of the hottest names in Hollywood, including Walter Matthau and Neil Simon's I Ought to Be in Pictures.
I had dinner twice with Monty Walsh. He's the cameraman on the picture. It was dinner, nothing else. But I found, much to my surprise, that I enjoyed being with him. I enjoyed talking to him. I enjoyed enjoying myself.
I'm glad. What'd you have for dinner?
Communication.
Well, then you must have gone to Angelo's. They make it great.
There's your typewriter, there's the paper. All you gotta do is get those snappy answers down on the page, and maybe someday you'll be able to afford to take me to Angelo's.
At 39 years old, the seasoned entertainer had overcome both professional and personal heartache and was enjoying one of the industry's most enviable marriages. After 20 years in Hollywood, Ann-Margret had every reason to believe that her struggles were well behind her.
You are watching Ann-Margret on Biography.
Ann-Margret was enjoying a thriving career and a happy marriage when her life took another surprising and dramatic turn. She noticed changes in her husband's stamina and appetite and insisted he see a doctor. Roger was diagnosed with myasthenia gravis, a rare, debilitating disease that affects the nervous system. Some days, Roger couldn't even muster the strength to get out of bed.
He was her strength. Through all of the good years, through the down years, he was there for her. And then when he developed myasthenia gravis, that degenerative disease, she said, now I'm going to be here for him.
Ann-Margret put her career on hold and took charge of Roger's care and their business interests.
His illness changed her remarkably. She could do nothing else but stop everything and be there for him.
After 2 harrowing years, Roger's energy and appetite improved. And with no explanation, doctors confirmed that his disease was in remission.
Their relationship is something made in heaven. After all these years, they're still like lovebirds.
I tip my hat most of all to Ann-Margret for her marriage to Roger. Who would have thought that this would-be sex kitten would wind up being such a loving, faithful wife to a good guy like Roger all these years? It just doesn't happen in this business.
At 41, Ann-Margret returned to show business, starring in a series of outstanding television movies, including Who Will Love My Children with Frederick Forrest, A Streetcar Named Desire, co-starring Treat Williams and Beverly D'Angelo, and The Two Mrs. Grenvilles with Claudette Colbert. As the former teen sensation entered her 50s, she was introduced to a new generation of fans. Playing the part of a middle-aged vixen opposite Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau in the blockbuster film Grumpy Old Men and its sequel Grumpier Old Men, Ann-Margret proved she was still the one and only kitten with a whip.
I thought it was a hoot. I thought Annie was a little young for the part. It was very flattering to me that she wanted to play my wife. It's terrific. Do that any day of the week, man. Who wouldn't?
In 1994, the popular yet private actress did something even her most devoted fans never expected. Ann-Margret, My Story, was a candid autobiography filled with incredible highs and many heartbreaking lows. The honesty with which it was written touched readers deeply, and the book remained on the New York Times bestseller list for weeks. Today, Ann-Margret enjoys her quiet life as a devoted wife and mother, while the other Ann-Margret is still in demand as the vivacious and sexy performer that audiences have adored for 4 decades. More than anything, Ann-Margret has stood the test of time. With tenacious determination and strength of character, she continues to delight and inspire an ever-growing legion of fans.
Ann-Margret basically is the most beautiful girl next door, and she appeals to all ages. It still does.
Hi, fellas.
She is a universal performer. She is somebody who has done it all and done it well.
I'm not a dewy-eyed Jew yet. No one has seen me Drew yet. I don't say a hot's a tot.
This is a person that never gives up. She's true inspiration.
She's always there for everyone. I feel very, very lucky to have her for a friend.
There's an innate sweetness within her.
Their voices were first heard in the 50s, yet still resonate today. This is Teen Idol's Week, our look at singers who dominated the charts and transformed pop music. Tonight, Leslie Gore, who sang about teenage angst and made the